Okay, everybody, please take your seats for the final session of the day. And Amit.
Thank you. Is this thing on? Tap, tap? Yeah. Okay, cool. Before I start, how many of you attended the last talk by Thomas? Okay, cool. I just want to say something before I start with my thing. I just talked about with Thomas after his talk. Someone asked if there are any tools or any ways to mitigate the attacks that he talked about, and is there a way to like enforce code signatures and stuff? And then I thought about it for a little bit, and I talked about it with Thomas. And actually, if you are hijacking a dynamic library, a dylib, you can actually overwrite the function that checks the signature, which is what Thomas suggested to do. So I thought about a quick fix, just sharing with you. When you are writing your program, start your program, pause all threads. I clicked this.
Okay,
yeah, okay. Start your program, make sure that none of the threads are doing anything important. Check your signature first and then load everything else. Because if someone hijacks libsystem, they can also hijack sec static code validity check, which is the call that you are calling in order to check your signatures. So free fix for everyone. And now for my shit. Okay, so hi everyone. I may go a little bit over time. This is cool with the conference. So please stick around because it's definitely worth it because it's just a cascade of dumb shit, what I'm going to show you. That's me, real quick. My name is weird. I'm originally from Israel. I am now a very well-documented US immigrant. Oh, right, I'm in Canada. No one gives a shit. I am the head of security research at Cybereason Nocturnus, which is our advanced research lab and services arm of the organization. I do a lot of research from low level to malware and Mac and Windows and Linux and everything. And I shitpost on Twitter, and that's my handle. So make sure you also heckle me there. Now, before I start, I need to give you guys a quick history lesson because this dumb story has been going on for a while, and it's honestly the gift that keeps on giving, at least for me. So back in 2016, about 2 years ago from now, I was bored one evening. I was still living in Israel back at the time, and I was an IRC. On a channel that's called OSX.Pirrit that's mainly revolves around OSX reverse engineering. And some guy popped into IRC and said, hey, I have this really weird thing going on my machine and I don't know what it is, but I have a bunch of new users that I don't know. They have root privileges. My machine is really slow. I'm getting bombarded with ads. I have no idea what this is. So I was bored enough that evening, so I took that thing and I tore it completely apart. I released a series of blog posts and articles, and I even talked about it in some conferences. And, excuse me, I ended up finding exactly who stands behind that adware that I named it OSX.Pirrit because it was a port of the Windows Pirrit adware. I found out it was an Israeli company, of course, and it had some really shady Israeli people behind it, of course. I can say that, it's cool, I'm a shady Israeli guy. And I ended up naming them, and if you were clever enough, you could easily find their photos, and that's how it ended for me about 2 years ago. And then almost a year ago in November of 2017, I have a bunch of Yara rules, and they started to light up like a Christmas tree because apparently those idiots were back with some more shitty adware. Of course, as I said, I shitposted a bunch of tweets on Twitter, and within less than a day, I started getting legal threats from the company that's called TargetingEdge, which is the company that develops OSX.Pirrit, and have those people working for them, the guys that I have unmasked, if you will. Now, I won't spend any time on this because this is absolutely crap, but basically they called me cybersecurity expert with quotes. They say that I don't know anything. They said that their product is not malware, that they have nothing to do with Pirrit. They are completely unrelated to that, which is kind of stupid because I already proved that they are because their names was in the goddamn code. But then again, they said that they had nothing to do with it. I said that I actually do believe that they are behind it. I proved it again. I also said that they are trying to distance themselves from this product. They said we are not trying to distance ourselves from this product because we have no relation to it. We will revisit that claim in the last slide of this talk. Also, and most importantly, they said that that's what I just said, that they're not trying to distance themselves, but they also said that their product is not trying to take over your machine, which it totally does that, and I will show you that as well. So basically what happened is, every day they sent me and Cybereason's attorney, they sent us a bunch of legal threat letters. Sometimes they send us even 2 a day, and they try to deter us from doing our job. Now at this point, this was a year after the whole Pirrit thing. Like, I already proved it was them. I had nothing clever to add because their photos were everywhere. But once they started to send me legal threat letters, I got kind of pissed off, and luckily our CEO was like, hey, they want to fuck with us, let's fuck with them back. So I got management behind me, so okay, let's play. They then said that their product is not malware, and then they sent, in their letter, they said, here is ESET's definition of what malware is. And of course, they check every one of those boxes, which is really stupid, and I will show you that as well. So now we need to start with what happened. The funniest thing is that they said, okay, if you are going to publish your report, because at the beginning they tried to send us a cease and desist, but then we told them, hey, your cease and desist doesn't mean anything. I mean, you're in Israel, we're in the US. This is not like an opinion, this is all facts. We've proven that this is you before. And they said, well, if you are going to publish your report, we demand that you will publish this sort of, I don't know how to call it exactly, a disclaimer, an article, whatever, in your report, because this is basically their version of things. Now, we are absolutely not obligated to put that anywhere, not in our report, not in our slideshow, not in our slide deck, not in everything. But this is so profoundly stupid that we had to do it. So, and again, I will make those slides available. There is already a different version of this talk on YouTube that you can also see that, because it's a waste of time, honestly. Now, their claim was everything is kosher. We're not doing everything. We're not doing anything weird. We're not hijacking your machine. Everything is in the end user license agreement. Now, for the life of me, I couldn't find an end user license agreement, and I had about 1,000 samples of their installers. There is no end-user license agreement anywhere. There is nothing on their website, and the only thing that is on their website is an email address. But when Zach Whitaker, which is he's a journalist, used to work at ZDNet back at the time. Now he's at TechCrunch. Zach Whitaker tried to reach out to them because he was writing an article on this whole thing. So he sent an email to info@targetingedge.com, which is on their website, and the email address doesn't exist, and the email bounced back. So yeah, everything is kosher and everything is awesome. So here we are now, starting this whole cascade of stupidness again. Now, before I get technical, I need to explain for a second how Mac installers work, how people usually get infected with adware on Macs. So let's talk about it. It's really it'll take me a minute. So in Mac installers are actually called packages, and packages have a few features. One of those features is something that's called a pre-flight script. Now, a pre-flight script is a script that, when you create the installer, you can define a pre-flight script, and a pre-flight script will get executed as soon as the installer is launched. So that means that runs before the end-user license agreement, that runs before you click I agree, that literally runs once you double-click. the installer. And usually the way that those things work is that you're going to one of those shitty software websites like Softonic and download.com and all of those, and then you download whatever you want to download, for example, VLC Media Player. But then what you will get is an installer that was made by one of those TargetingEdge kind of adware software monetization companies. And you will get an installer that sometimes will actually install what you wanted to install, and sometimes it will not. But it will always install some sort of adware on your machine. And the way that it happens is that the adware is installed through those pre-flight scripts. So you double-click the thing, and then you get adware, which I call herpes. So you double-click the thing, you get herpes, and then maybe you get VLC Media Player. But in most of the cases, you don't get anything. You just get herpes, which is a lose-lose situation for everyone. Now, the new installers that I looked at, the ones that started showing up on my Yara rules, had something really weird with them. The pre-flight script was accessing that URL, and as you can see, I don't have a pointer, but where the red arrow is, right here, you can see that there is an ID. Now, that ID is like a long GUID that only works once, so this GUID is generated every time you download the package. Now, obviously, by the time I got the samples, that package was already executed on someone else's machine, so that link did not work. So at that point, I was kind of stuck because I had something, but I couldn't get it to work. So what I did is basically my life motto: when everything fails, apply fuckery. So I just took that whole URL, shoved it into Python, and I just said, OK, requests.get. And I tried to request that URL, but instead of putting that long ID here, I just put a single quote, just a single quote. And I said, I wonder what's going to happen if I'll send that request. And what happened is I got another URL back from the server. And I was like, OK, what is going to happen if I'll request that URL? I got an installation script with like 300 and something lines. Like, oh my God, that's great. And I'll zoom in quite a bit for you because it's kind of hard to see. But if you look here, like right in the middle, you can see that things are running with sudo. And if something is, if they have the ability to run something with sudo, that means that they can run stuff with root. Because usually when you do sudo something, the machine will ask you for your password, which on a default installation of macOS, your root password is basically your own password because you're sudoing as yourself. It's the practice that's also common in like Ubuntu Linux installations, and it's kind of bad, so that thing should stop. But the question is, how can they run things with like root access if they've just started running and like the thing does not ask for your password? So I actually answered that in my previous talk about Pirrit from 2 years ago. When you're running a package installer on Mac, the first thing that happens is you get a pop-up that says the package installer or whatever installer wants your permission to change some stuff on your system, because obviously you need to give it permissions to install. Once you give it the password, the installer has your password, and it can run anything as root because your password is the root password. So this is how they escalate themselves to root. It's not clever, it's pretty dumb, but that's how things are. Now, once this huge script is running, so as I stated, it has 329 lines, which is that thing. Now, this script was almost identical to the script from 2 years ago. And again, like TargetingEdge say, they keep saying, we have nothing to do with this, we are not connected to this by any way or form, and yet the code is like almost identical. It was like 99% identical. The only thing that was different was a bunch of URLs and some other like variables, but the code was exactly the same. That script had a lot of URLs. Those URLs resolved to a bunch of different servers. So, and those servers also had DGA addresses. Anybody here knows what a DGA is? OK, cool. So for those of you that don't know, DGA stands for domain generation algorithm. That means that it's a tactic that a lot of malware are using. It basically means that there is like an algorithm that generates predictable domain names, and then the attackers can register domain names on the fly, because if one of their domains that was connected to a CNC was blocked or was published somewhere, they could just scrap that domain and register a different domain, and this does not need to be synced in any way with the malware, because the algorithm that's in the malware is going to generate a domain that is predictable by the attackers. So that's exactly what they did. All of their domains were like weird, and like had all of those domains also look like completely random, like a cat walked on the keyboard. And there were a bunch of domains like this in the adware. And again, like when you see something like that as a malware research, you're automatically like, wow, this is malware. Like nothing legitimate ever looks like that. Now, those scripts those scripts that are running, they are downloading a bunch of payloads, and every time it's like those Russian Matryoshka dolls, where you open one and there's a smaller doll inside, and you open one and there's a smaller one inside. So that's pretty much how they work. And let's look at that for a second. So first of all, when the first script runs, it generates a random word, sorry. The way that it does that, and this is taken directly from the script, there is a function that's called RND, stands for random, and it basically just cats the word dictionary file that exists on any Mac in /usr/share/dict/words. It then picks up a random word and saves it into a variable. The purpose of this thing is to make each installation on each computer different. So if I am, as a researcher, for example, if I put it on my machine and the word that was selected is table, then I will tell my friends, hey, see if you have this launch agent or a directory or a file or whatever that's called table. Obviously, they won't have it because on their machine, a different word was selected. So part of making it stealthy is to generate a random word. Thing is that exactly the same thing with the same line, with the same function name, with the same line of code, exactly the same thing happened 2 years ago in old Pirrit, in Pirrit v1, and again, they say that they have nothing to do with it. Once the random word was generated, the next step would be to get the unique identifier of the computer. So each Mac has a unique identifier, like a serial number, and there's only one of those in the world, so your Mac is unique. And this unique identifier is being taken from IOReg, which think about it like the registry on Windows, but on Mac. So they're simply executing IOReg, and they're taking that piece of information from IOReg, which is your unique identifier of your Mac, and then they send it to their server. Now, if you look at the domain here, you can see one of those weird domains, right? It's like a number, and then it's like it looks like a cat walked on a keyboard, as I said. And then they take your identifier and they send it back to them. And they do that because that's how they can identify you, and that's how they can know if adware was actually executed and installed on your machine successfully. They explicitly said that they don't do that. The next step will be to phone home and say, hey, everything is going well. So they're phoning home with your unique identifier, and they're saying, okay, I have now installed Pirrit on this machine, identified by your UUID, and then they will download another payload. This payload will create a launch agent, which is an autorun in MacSpeak. And that autorun will also have a random name. Now, if you look at the file that's being downloaded, because this also downloads a binary executable. And if you look at the binary executable and you look at the names of the functions, you can see something very interesting. So you can see that the names of the functions are start update, and connection did receive response, did receive data, will cache, blah, 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 blah. And then they have a function that's called run external application, which accepts arguments. And when you look at it in IDA Pro, you see that, I hope that this is legible enough, you can see that they're actually this function actually executes bin.sh, your shell interpreter, and it takes an argument. So this is basically a rat now, which is something that they didn't have before. So right now, they have the ability, not only that they're installed on your machine, they also have functionality which is like a rat. They can execute commands. And they can execute commands as root, which is something that they explicitly said that they're not doing. Another interesting fact about this binary is that it is code signed. Now, as Thomas just mentioned in his talk, code signature is a feature that Apple added that's supposed to make everything more secure because every binary that's executed on a Mac system should be code signed. Now, here's the thing. Code signing on Apple is kind of dumb because in order to get a code signing certificate, you need to pay Apple $99 and tell them a story. So, in old Pirrit, what they did is they stockpiled a bunch of code signing certificates. And every time I found a new variant of their code and I found a new server that distributes their malware, I contacted Apple and I said, hey, this is the hash, this is the code signing certificate, please revoke it. Then Apple went ahead and revoked it, and within 25 minutes, they had a new version with a different code signature. And I did this process for like 25 or 30 times, and then I just stopped, and I realized they just have a bunch of code signing certificates. Now, all of those code signing certificates from 2 years ago had Israeli names. So that's when I started suspecting that, this is interesting, they are Israeli. Wow, I am running low on time, and there are a lot of slides. This is kind of bad. I am running through this, so if there are any questions, please stop me after. Please stop me at the hallway after the talk and ask me more questions. But I got to run through. Now, once the second payload with the launch agent was installed, it will enumerate the list of running processes. Because the purpose of this malware is to basically show you ads, and it needs to see which browsers you're running on your machine. So it will list the running processes, it will check for browsers, and it will then know which ad package to download, because it needs to download an ad package that works with your browser, whether you're using Chrome or Firefox or another interesting thing that you'll soon see. It will also create another launch agent, and it will generate another random name for it. And the reason that they're doing it is like a bunch of watchdogs, because if you remove one launch agent, then they still have another launch agent that makes sure that things are still running, and it will then create a new launch agent over and over again. As you can see, the randomly generated words are right here. In my case, it was roadless. It basically took two words, road and less, and mashed it together. So now we have more payloads because, as I said, it's like a matryoshka doll. So now their script is downloading another payload. This time it's a TargetingEdge archive. And when it's extracted, we could see some interesting things. We can see a file that's called browser enhancer, and there's a file that's called updater, and a file that's called protector. Now, when I looked at protector, I said, wait, protector? What are they protecting against? So protector is actually a binary file, an executable, that has only one purpose. And its purpose is to check that all of the payloads are running and that all of the launch agents and launch daemons are still there. This is the watchdog I was talking about. If one of those was removed, it will be brought back by protector. Again, protector is setting up another launch daemon with a random name, but this time, instead of generating it from the dictionary file, there is another file that's called names.db, and it just has a bunch of strings in it, and it just randomly picks something from that file and creates a launch agent. Now, here's something pretty cool, that their script that installs the ad package looks for a plugin, a Safari plugin that's called OmniKey, and removes it. The reason that it's removing it is because OmniKey apparently interferes with their malware, so they just straight up removing it without asking you anything, which is again something that they said that they're not doing. Now, for a while, I was wondering, OK, I call it Pirrit, and like all AV engines are now calling it Pirrit, but what are they calling it? And since their OPSEC is awesome, all of the code is commented. And when the thing is starting to run, it's actually saying installing DaVinci. So that's why I called it the DaVinci Code, which is a shitty pun, but I just had to do it. Now let's talk for a second about browserenhancer.app, which is one of the binary files that are being downloaded. This GIF is so fucking awesome, and all of you are very confused right now. So as I demonstrated in my previous talk about Pirrit, their framework of choice is Qt, which is a cross-platform development framework. They used it all the time in all of their tools in Pirrit version 1, and this is just another indicator that ties it to them, although, again, they say that it's not them and they have nothing to do with it. Now, Browser Enhancer will look for browsers in order to change their settings. Now, Browser Enhancer is looking for Firefox, Safari, Chrome, or Microsoft Internet Explorer on a Mac. Now, always when I'm giving this talk, there's like one clever bastard in the audience that said, well, but there is a Microsoft Internet Explorer for Mac. I'm like, yes, there was one in version 6. We are like, what? There's like, Explorer, the last version was what, like 13 or 12 or something? Like, that doesn't happen anymore. And then the same person says, yeah, but you can run Wine. So no, that won't work. This is a straight up mistake, and this is really dumb because they ported part of their code from Windows. Another thing that's like really funny, and again, I found it in the old version, are registry keys inside the binary. Why would there be a registry key inside a Mac binary, and how the hell did it even compile? I don't know, but it's there. It's just some more examples for sloppy code. Now, once Browser Enhancer is executed, the browsers will restart themselves because they need to enable the freshly installed features. Now, what are those features, one might ask? They are tracking every one of your cookies. Sometimes they're even sending your cookies back to them. Again, it's something that they're saying that they're not doing. And it's also hijacking your search page. Now, if you look at what they're doing here, they're actually using OSX.Script, which is the AppleScript interpreter that was mentioned by both Patrick and Thomas. If you don't know what AppleScript is, it's a very convenient scripting language which you can use English to just do things, like tell application Firefox to launch or tell application Firefox to close Windows. Now, in the very little time that I actually have a minute, is it okay if I steal like 5 or 10 extra minutes from your time? Yes, sir. Awesome. Oh, this is so much. I feel so much better now. It's impossible to do this slide to do this talk in like 25 minutes. Now, AppleScript, we're going to go right back into it. But if we look at the hijacked search page, we can see this great search engine that we all know that's called Tika Search. And if we look at the bottom, we can see that Tika Search is actually a product of another great adware giant from my home country, which is Babylon Limited. So again, this is all fine. This is not adware. This is not malware. This is great. But there is more. So another payload that's being downloaded is another binary executable that's called macver. Now, macver will be renamed to yet another randomly generated name by the same way, which is just grabbing a random word and putting it in a variable. After this word was generated, there will now be a launch agent that's created. The launch agent name will be com.application.plist, and it will be created in /library/preferences. And if we look at the content of it, we can see the randomly generated name right here, sailcloth. Okay. And this is not important. We don't have time. Now, we need to look at macver because this is a crucial part of understanding that thing and how it works. Now, macver is a 64-bit Mach-O executable. Mach-O is the executable format that runs on Macs. Just like Windows has PEs, Linux has ELFs, and Macs have Mach-Os. Now, unlike all of the other executables that are dropped by TargetingEdge on your machines, macver does not import any Qt resources, which is kind of weird, but because they use Qt for everything, but actually malware is doing a lot of other interesting things. So I'm going to give you a pro tip right now. So this is a screenshot of the string section through IDA Pro, and you can see a lot of base64 code. Now, when you want to encrypt something and make it encrypted and secure and impossible to make sense of, you encrypt something with base64, because we all know that base64 is the most secured form of encryption out there. Now, once I decrypted, and it was very, very, very hard, and it took days of advanced research to decrypt all of those base64 strings, it revealed a lot of AppleScript code. Now, I already mentioned what AppleScript is. Now, the way that AppleScript works is that if you want to conform with Apple's development methodologies, your app supposed to have an AppleScript API. For example, Photoshop has an AppleScript API. You can tell Photoshop to do stuff. So a lot of people are using AppleScript to automate a lot of mundane tasks. For example, I used to have a script, an AppleScript that applied a frame to like a bunch of photos I used to take with my camera. So instead of like going to each photo and applying that frame, I would just have an AppleScript that will tell Photoshop to take a whole bunch of photos and put a frame to them. Because AppleScript is very convenient to automate tasks in other applications. This is basically code injection. So, yo dog, I heard you like code injection, so we used AppleScript to inject code that injects JavaScript to your browser. So this is basically what they're doing with Pirrit. Now, when decrypting those base64 strings, what we actually get is a lot of AppleScript code. Now, if we look at that code, we can see if Safari is running, then tell application Safari to set page source to do JavaScript, document body, blah, 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 and then it just injects a bunch of JavaScript code to your browser. Again, this is a feature of your operating system. They're not hacking anything. They're not exploiting anything. AppleScript is a feature of macOS. And they're just using that feature, which is something that they actually said that they're doing. They said, we're not exploiting. We're just using features. So they got that one right. And they're actually using that feature to inject JavaScript to your browser. And that JavaScript actually plants all of that crap in your browser. Here's the same thing, but for Chrome this time. So again, if Chrome is running, then inject a whole bunch of crap into it. So just to get things straight, because I'm like running here, we have the binary that's called malware. Malware launches OSX.Script, which is the AppleScript interpreter, and it then gets the URL that runs on Chrome, again, just by using AppleScript. And if the URL matches a certain rule set, if you will, it will then inject JavaScript that will display ads in your browser. So if you are in Amazon and you are looking for shoes, malware will know that, and they will take all of that information from your browser. They will send it back to TargetingEdge's server. Then there will be a bidding war for ads. And then malware will inject to your browser using OSX.Script, using JavaScript. It will inject ads that are relevant to you because you're looking to buy shoes and you are on Amazon. That whole thing happens every second. So that thing makes your computer really, really slow. Now, in older versions of Pirrit, in Pirrit v1, TargetingEdge actually installed a proxy server on your machine. My talk is on YouTube. Just look for my name, type Pirrit, and you'll find it. I'm going into great length of detail in that talk. Now, the nice thing about writing articles about TargetingEdge is that they are reading my articles. So they are implementing my advice. So I said in like my first talk, I said, wow, why are they doing all of this dumb stuff with like downloading a proxy server and rerouting your traffic and messing with your firewall? They could just use AppleScript, and then they just did it. And after my previous talk, when I talked about the base64 stuff, they released a new variant and they actually used encryption. So like, it's so cool to have this relationship with them. So another cool thing is that if we're running malware in a terminal, because originally they did not think that anyone will run their app in a terminal. because they're so hackery and elite like that. But if you run it in a terminal, it actually has a really, really useful debug output. So here is me running that and going to Google, and I just typed error. And you can see the whole URL here, google.com/search, blah, 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 blah. And this is the query, error, right here. And then it sends it back to them. And then the server sends them a URL, loadingpages.info, and then there's a long GUID, blah, blah, blah. And then you can see that the URL that's being sent back from their server is then being sent to the server via all of that crap I showed you just 2 slides ago. And then it gives me a fake AV ad for MacKeeper, which is like really the garbage of OS X. And if you're ever thinking about installing MacKeeper, just don't run away, leave your computer, just run outside. Don't ever do that because this will install more crap. I wonder if they're going to sue me also. Now, in the previous episodes of TargetingEdge, of my experience with TargetingEdge, the way that I found them was I was actually being lazy. And I was running their malware, and they started to download all of those TargEZ archives on my machine. And I was too lazy to fire up another test VM and wait for the thing to boot and put the thing inside. So it's just, OK, instead of extracting the file on my machine, I'll just list the files that are inside the TargEZ archive. Now, the cool thing about the TargEZ archive is that it's a POSIX format. And because it's a POSIX format, it saves the original permissions as they were created on the original machine inside the archive. So if you're listing the archive, you can see the original username and the group that created the archive on the original machine. Now, 2 years ago, and that's how I found them, the username was their first and last name. And that's how I found them, and like a quick LinkedIn search, and I found TargetingEdge, and it was super easy to spot them. And because they're listening to my talks, and maybe even attended some of them because I gave it in Israel once, now all of the usernames are Batman. But it's fine, don't worry about it. So if we're talking about attribution, I mean, I have all of the proof from 2 years ago that it's them. But yet they're still saying we have nothing to do with this, and we have no relation to OSX.Pirrit whatsoever. And like this is where I'm bringing this puppy home and letting you all go. So now I have pretty good knowledge of how they work, and I already done it before, and I already know like what kind of techniques they're using and what kind of stupid mistakes that they're using. And obviously, when I'm writing a big report and sharing everything, I'm not really sharing everything. I'm keeping some information to myself because I want to find them again. So let's see what we have so far, right? So we have code that looks almost identical to the code from 2 years ago. And because I was going through it really, really fast, go to YouTube, check out my previous talk from 2 years ago, and you'll get it. Like, this will all make sense. Their methods, which is their scripts and their payloads and the way that they're generating random strings and random names and everything, like we've seen the exact same code 2 years ago. And there's also frantic letters from their attorneys telling us this is not us, although it is clearly them. And obviously, if it's not them, why are they so protective of their intellectual property? Who knows? But the thing is that all of this is just my opinion. It's not really proof, right? So what is proof? So when we're looking at their domains, we can see that all of their domains, and they have a ton of them, all of their domains are registered with the privacy thing, where you do a who is on the domain, and you get like domains by proxy, and you can't see who registered that domain. Now, what I noticed is that all of their domains are registered in batches, usually of 10 or 12 domains at a time. But there was one batch where someone just fucked up and forgot to check the privacy box and pay the extra $10 for the privacy. So they had a bunch of domains that share an IP address with a bunch of their other domains. And if you look at the, and that was the domain here. And if you look at the email that registered them, it's their email of their CEO, which is right here. But again, what is proof, right? And here is an who is on that domain. And this is the name of their CEO. And this is TargetingEdge. And this is their address, which is literally 3 streets away from our offices in Tel Aviv. which is kind of fun. But there's also a resume that was sent to us by one of the people that wrote Pirrit, one of the names. And it was sent to us after I published my 2 articles 2 years ago. So that was sent to me last January by our recruiter asking me if I know this guy. Because in his resume that he sent us because he wanted to work for Cybereason, he wrote this. Let's process that for a minute. Because I was an asshole and I saved this for last. So like when their lawyers kept threatening us every day, so our attorney was like, listen, you got to send them the resume. And I had I fought with our attorney. I'm like, no. Let's save it until shit really goes bad. And then when they started sending us 3 letters a day, I was like, fuck this shit. I just sent it, oh yeah, who's this guy? So that was super funny. And that was the point where they just gave up. And remember, and again, I went through it really, really quickly. But in their letters, in their frantic letters, they said, we didn't use any exploits, we're not doing anything illegal, blah, blah, blah. But this dude, in his resume, he says, my work appeared in the Cybereason Lab report, which is my report, and itnew.com article. When you go to that article, you can see Mac OS X root privileges 0 day under active exploit by Adware. So this guy basically admitted all of that crap in a resume that he sent to us. Oh my God. What do you think? I invited his resume to my junk folder. No, I don't. No. I was also in Boston by that time, so no. But the answer is no. So before I let you all go, if there's one message I want to send after this talk is I went through all of this really, really quickly, and I showed you how an adware can completely own your machine and use operating system features and not exploit anything, and basically I showed you how crappy OS X is. But that's not the takeaway that I want to give you, because if you ever spend some time doing some research work on OS X, you already know that. What I do want to tell you is if you're a malware researcher, if you're doing security research, and you're starting to get threat letters from attorney, it means that you're doing your job the right way. So try to work with your employer, try to work with your legal department, try to make them understand that this is actually important, because I can tell you something about something that happened when I was doing this work. A large publication that one of their journalists might be in this room earlier. Is he here? I don't see him. It's a very large publication. Their name is it's a very important part of your computer, like a physical part. And they got an exclusive story, to write an exclusive story about that whole thing. And I worked with that journalist, which I love, and I respect him a lot. I have nothing against him, don't get me wrong. But their legal department got a bunch of threat letters from TargetingEdge as well. Now, this media company that this journalist is working for sent people to interview ISIS operatives in Iraq and Syria. These are people that ISIS don't fuck around, and that media company doesn't fuck around as well. And yet they got scared of some Mickey Mouse threat letters. So if someone is threatening you, and if someone is keeping you from doing your job and trying to threaten you and scare you from doing your job, it means that you're doing it right. So insist on it with your employer, and insist on it with your legal department, and make sure that if you did something and you exposed something and you believe that it's malicious, make sure that it goes out there, and don't let other people scare you. If you have any more questions, because I'm way over time, I'll be outside, and all of this stuff is on YouTube and on the Cybereason blog, and just heckle me on Twitter if you have any more questions. Thank you very much for your attention. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.